Hi guys, Toby Mathis here, and today we're going to talk about how doctors can protect their assets and what type of asset protection plans work for medical professionals. Now, if you're of any type of professional, this would actually be pertinent to you, but I'm going to really specifically address our friends in the medical profession. So if you are a doctor, and I would say a medical doctor, an MD, and you have a high earning capacity, then let me just kind of walk you through the type of issues that could occur. Number one, I have a very good friend that's one of the best insurance agents in the United States, was actually selected as the national best agent for farmers in 1 year, has a bunch of little businesses. And it's actually interesting. He's now a police officer because he made a ton of money, has that working, but he wanted to give back. So he's an interesting person. But he says doctors are always being cheap with their insurance. So make sure you have good insurance. To my friends in the medical, make sure that you have good insurance. So you want to make sure that you have your regular insurance and for medical and for adequately insuring your other liabilities. Because here's the thing. This thing generates cash. You tend to make a lot of money. W-2, 1099, whatever it is, you tend to make a lot of money. And that's a target. This is a big target for somebody. If you get into a car accident, resist the temptation of saying, I'm a doctor, because the value of the claim just shot up. They joke about this stuff in the insurance area. Like I've had conversations with multiple agents, including my friend, and they always say like, oh, the worst thing you could do is just sit there and say, I'm a doctor, because the value of the case just went up because they're looking at this target thing and they're saying, hey, number one, I might go after that time. I might go after that money. And I didn't misspeak. They might go after that time. They might know that if they can inconvenience you, the value of the case just went up. So you're sitting there going, oh man, they're going to drag me into some sort of protracted litigation. I have to sit at the table. If it's a week, I'm going to lose a week of my pay, which is a lot for some of y'all, right? And you have to sit there. The insurance company says, you got to be there. You're the insured. You get to sit at the table. If it's 2 weeks, you get to spend 2 weeks sitting in a courtroom while somebody fights over a $50,000 thing. Like they know that they're going to try to extract some out of you. So make sure that you have good insurance. Make sure that you have a good umbrella policy. Please, it's cheap. And it's great lawyer insurance. If you have a massive liability, and I don't care whether you're getting personal and commercial, we'll get into this in a second. Make sure that I would say you have a commercial policy, especially if you have real estate and things like that. Make sure that you have a really good policy that covers you and any of the types of investing you might be doing. The old example I would give is here's a doctor making $1 million a year. Maybe they're a great surgeon or they have just a really good practice. And they go and they buy a cheapo house. They say, you know what, I'm going to get into real estate and I'm going to buy a few properties, but I'm going to start in this place. I can buy a house for $50,000. What's the worst thing that could happen? Let's say that house, that you buy that house and somebody comes after you because you discriminated, or somebody says there's mold, or somebody says that they fell down the stairs and it was in disrepair, and they sue you. What's the worst thing that could happen? Well, it's not just take the house, is they could garnish you for the rest of your life. You're not going to be able to bankrupt that one. You make too much money. So they'll just keep garnishing you, and then they'll go after your estate. The worst thing that could happen is they just sit there and extract money out of you for the rest of your life. And then they go after your heirs, right? They're going after the estate before it gets to the heirs. So how do you protect yourself? Number one is you isolate risk asset. You isolate that risk. So if you have rental properties, at a minimum, you're going to isolate those by putting them into either some sort of LLC, land trust, statutory trust. You're going to put it into something that limits your liability. So I'm just going to call it a limited liability entity. The exact type depends on the jurisdiction, what type of property is, etc. So for example, you're in California, we're probably using a statutory trust or an LP. If you're in Florida, we're probably using a land trust. If you are in Indiana, you're probably using an LLC, right? And it's going to depend on where the real estate is. So we're isolating the risk asset. After we isolate the risk, we're going to create what's called outside liability protection, and we're going to protect the real estate, the risk asset. So I'm just going to put real estate here. We're going to protect it from you. This is called outside liability. Everybody's used to inside. Hey, somebody falls down the stairs and they sue you, they're going to be limited to this box. Outside liability is you do something. Let's say that you get sued in your practice and they say, I want that real estate. So we want to isolate it from you. This is called outside liability. How do we isolate outside liability? We use a jurisdiction like Wyoming and we create a holding company. For a doctor, that's a high income earner that's in a high risk profession. You're a surgeon, we may want to put another layer on this called an asset protection trust. I'm just going to use NAPT because I'm going to use a Nevada asset protection trust, probably a hybrid trust, which I'm not going to get into too much detail. People can't get through that, period, full stop. It's never actually gone through a complete trial outside of a bankruptcy because nobody can get through it because statutorily it says, sorry guys, you can't get it. You can't take the asset. We use a hybrid provision because then you could still get the money back out. Usually we use a hybrid, which is like lineal descendants of your parents and your then spouse. We actually use a floating spouse provision. And all that means is that you don't name your spouse. You just say, if you're married, we can get money to your spouse. And we make sure that there's multiple trustees. There's a blocker trustee and you're in charge of all the investments. You still manage all the investments. Won't get into all that today. But that creates isolation. And before you say, well, but what about alimony and child support? And what if somebody sues me for $50 million? Nope, it works against all three of those. It's a statute here. It's called our spendthrift trust or credit shelter trust is what a lot of folks know it as. But NAPT or DAPT, that's what your lawyer will know it as. Domestic Asset Protection Trust, we use Nevada. So I like to use a Nevada Asset Protection Trust. Layer it with a Wyoming LLC that owns the asset. I'm probably going to be taxing that, by the way, as a partnership for other reasons. But this creates a very, very powerful asset protection. People are going to say, well, why not go offshore and do all that? It's too cute. You're going to get yourself into all sorts of trouble. Because the only reason somebody takes something offshore, unless you have business offshore, is to hide assets from creditors, which is a fraudulent conveyance. Like you're literally creating a scenario that's going to ruin you because you're trying, like the thing you're trying to protect yourself against, you're bringing yourself right to it. And I clerked for multiple judges, but one of them in particular said, too cute. If they see too cute, they ignore it and they actually hammer the defendant. If they see a defendant that's doing stuff and they said, the only reason you did that, the only reason was to screw over a creditor, they're gonna use what's called equitable remedies, and they're gonna say, nope, bring it all back in here. There's lots of cases on that one, by the way. So we don't do it. I'm not gonna go offshore unless somebody has business overseas. We're not doing it. We're gonna stay in the United States, and we're gonna really look at three things, by the way. We're not just looking at asset protection, but the same plan is gonna incorporate your legacy planning and estate planning and tax planning. We're never doing anything just for asset protection purposes. There's always other benefits, and we're going to make sure that we're looking at all those and addressing them. But if you are a doctor and you want a good protection plan, this is how you do it. It's not hard. It's actually sometimes simple is way better, but you have to have it in place before there's liability. And I can't stress that enough. Before there's a liability occurrence, you got to have this in place. Now, there are things you can do after, but you have to be cognizant of something called a fraudulent conveyance. We do not want to have somebody that we owe money to and we move an asset outside of their reach because they could avoid that transaction. And there could be nasty repercussions to doing it. You do make it harder, but you just don't do it. Like, we're not going to commit fraud. What we are going to do is put a plan in place that minimizes risk and allows these two things right here to kick in and be enough to cover. So if somebody's being unreasonable, they see, great, I have a doctor as a defendant and I am going to squeeze them till their head pops. That situation where you've got plaintiff lawyer that loves to chase ambulances and stuff, right? And they're after you because you have deep pockets, and their perception is deep pockets. You have an asset protection plan in place, and they see that. You know what they do? They say, well, there's other people that are much easier to go after. Why am I going to spend $250,000 out of pocket to chase something where I may not get a recovery? It pushes the value of your case down so that your insurance and your umbrella policy can cover it. And you can get on with your life. One of the things we're protecting most with the medical profession, I'll just say it, it's your time. We want to make sure that you're not inconvenienced and you're not being drug out of your profession, and that your patients are suffering as a result because you're having to deal with some nonsense because some lawyer decided that they were going to make their bones on you. Right there, hey, this is my new car. If I can go after this doctor and really inconvenience them so that they cough up a bunch of coin. And number two, and this is the one that nobody ever talks about, I call it the 2 a.m.s. It's the stress. If you've ever been sued, you know what I'm talking about. And by the way, if you're an investor, if you're a doctor, if you're anything, and you make good money, you're going to get sued. The stats are about 4 or 5 times during your lifetime. You're going to get to enjoy that, right? What we want to do is make it just nothing more than a business transaction. No emotion involved. Because when you get sued, you tend to get emotional. And you're lying awake at 2 a.m. You wake up and all of a sudden you start thinking about your case and how frustrated you are and how angry you are. And you're staring at the ceiling and it's doing bad things to your health. And there's a consequence to that. We want to avoid that. We want you to be able to say, lawyers, you take care of it. Make it go away. That's why I have this insurance policy. Right? We want to make sure it's not sucking your time away. And frankly, it sucks to get shook down, but you just look at it as nothing more than another transaction. Or here's another way to put it. Somebody put it and explained it to me. I'm a real estate investor. Maybe you do the same thing. Every now and again, something bad happens to a property. So a tree falls on your house. I had a tree fall right on a house once, squished it. And the person was home. Thank God she was okay, because it was a cinder block home in North Carolina, and that tree fell on it, but it didn't do anything. The house practically hurt the tree more, right? The roof was destroyed, but the walls, thank God, held that tree. I never got mad at the tree. The tree just fell over. It was rainy, tree falls over. But I didn't have a personal gripe with the tree. You're going to get sued. You're going to have it. Just pretend it's a tree. Fell on my house. It sucks that I have to deal with it. It's frustrating. But at the end of the day, don't let it suck your emotion and go after it. The best thing I could tell you is insure yourself so that you don't have to devote your intellect to that experience. It's easier said than done, I know. When somebody sues you, like maybe they serve you in the middle of a party or something like that, or they get you, at your office and they try to surprise you, and you're just mad. You want to punch that attorney in the nose. And you're like, this is so unfair. They're alleging all this crazy stuff, right? And you know it's a shakedown. You just got to look at it and say, here, lawyer, here, insurance, you take care of it. This is what I pay you for. And go about your business. Try to detach yourself from it, because that's one of the biggest costs nobody ever talks about, is there's an emotional toll to getting drug into things. And so we're going to minimize the financial impact. We're going to minimize the amount of time you have to devote to it. And we're going to minimize the amount of emotional energy you put into these things. And you're going to learn to detach and say, you know what, this is why I have this. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. On a time horizon, it's inevitable. The longer we're in business, the more likely it's going to be that it happens. It's just one of those things that comes along with a capitalist society and a free society and easy access to courts, is that you have people that abuse it. And you just want to be able to say, I'm okay. This is why I have insurance. This is why I have these things. And I just don't want to get shook down and taken advantage of. And this will minimize it, so that you are in a situation where, A, you're not an attractive target, so nobody really wants to go after you. So if it's a Should I take this case or not? You want it to be or not. You want it to be this person is going to be hard to go after. If you do get a case that is legitimate, you want to be able to settle it. And you want to be able to settle it sooner than later. And the way you do that is you make sure that they know that there may not be a recovery or that the recovery is limited. If you know what declining limit policies are and things like that, it pushes people to settle on earlier rather than drag these things out, which is helpful, very helpful to limiting the amount of time and emotional response you have to devote to these things. So I pray for you that you never get into a knockdown, drag out suit. But if you do, you want to be prepared. And you want it to minimize the amount of damages that it does to you, your practice, and other things. So I hope I explained this well to you. If you know other doctors who could benefit from this, please share this. If you like this type of information, please subscribe and you click on the little bell. It'll notify you when new videos come up. And if you have something specific that you want to ask, by all means, reach out. We do free consultations. But even more importantly, if there's a topic that you want me to address for another video or that you believe would help you and your profession out, by all means, put it in the comments below. That's where we get our ideas for videos, and we'll make something for you.